The opinions expressed by guests on Town Hall, a Black Queer podcast, are solely their own and do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of the podcast host, Bob the Drag Queen and Peppermint, the podcast production team, or the organization Black Queer Town Hall. Each participant is chosen for their unique perspective relevant to the theme of their featured episode. While we strive to provide a platform for diverse voices and narratives, individual opinions may vary, and listeners are encouraged to engage critically and respectfully with the content and the people presented.
I went home, I spoke to my mother, who was a dark-skinned Black girl, and I was like, Mommy, did you see me as Black? And she was like, no.
Well, did you ever use Mavis Beacon teaches typing? Did
Who?
any of y'all use that? Okay, Mavis Beacon. She teaches typing.
Who's Mavis Beacon?
It's her thing. She's a Black woman who teaches you how to type. Her name is Mavis.
She
I don't
does?
know, I didn't
Let
know
me
if
look
Mavis
her up.
Beacon is a real person.
Who is Mavis Beacon?
What?
Oh my God, I see her. Mavis Beacon teaches.
So she's
real?
modeled. So she.
The
Oh my God,
dark mystery
Mavis
of
Beacon like
Mavis Beacon.
Mavis.
Oh my gosh.
So is Mavis Beacon kind of like the technology
She's not
version
real.
of like Aunt Jemima? Like white people using a Black woman to teach their children?
But why? If she wasn't real, then how did you experience her?
Well, she's a picture.
She's a picture.
Cartoon.
So it's just a picture, and then like step 1, step 2. It's not like a video of some lady.
No.
Well, they're going to resurrect her, and now she's going to be AI.
Oh yeah, that's Mavis. So Mavis Beacon would come on and she would teach us all how to type. She would tell us home row keys. Yeah,
But it wasn't like
Mavis
she
Beacon,
would teach
icon.
you. It's like you would learn, because it's not like
Honey, Mavis Beacon is women in STEM, honey.
Women in STEM. You know,
It's some
it's
white
some
man.
white guy.
Probably,
it's some
yeah.
white. It's not even one white guy. It's like 10.
Shout out to that model who probably unknowingly was Mavis Beacon.
Who posed for $10 or $20 for a stock photo session and didn't get paid, knowing that her picture was going to be used by Microsoft or whoever.
By the way, this is all we don't know for sure. Mavis Beacon might have actually built the empire. We didn't. I mean, Pep didn't even know who Mavis Beacon was.
I don't.
3 minutes ago. So maybe Mavis Beacon. Mavis Beacon, if you're out there, if you're real, please contact us, and
We'll bring you on. We want to
to-
talk to Mavis Beacon.
What if Mavis Beacon is like a queer icon? What if she's like, oh, I'm a Black queer non-binary they them me?
Honey, Babadook is so 2017. It is now time for Mavis Beacon.
For Mavis Beacon. All right, Peppermint.
Bob,
welcome back.
to the podcast, because the last couple episodes we had to do it without you, and I miss you so much.
They were beautiful episodes.
Yeah, they were
though.
really.
You know,
good.
it's really interesting to be able to listen to the podcast without myself, because I was going to say this is a podcast I've always wanted to listen to. So it's really cool to be able to listen to them. I would download them. I sound so old. You can download them on your phone. I would download them and listen to them on flights and stuff, and I just really,
honey, we
thoroughly
gave capitalism a run for its minutia.
Yeah, capitalism was a key. But today we have an even more. First of all, let's just go ahead and let you all know what we're doing. Welcome back to Town Hall, a Black queer podcast, the podcast where we journey through a theme by sharing stories, music, poetry, and art of varying depth and hilarity.
Yeah.
And you know, I am back because I was finishing up the celebration tour with Madonna,
which you've been working on for like 3 years,
show,
right?
Literally
okay,
a year and a
half.
I started working on this tour in October of 2022.
Long time.
And I finished it up in May of 2020.
I just want to say congratulations. It is to anybody who is queer, or is and or was queer or is queer, any queer person who grew up listening to Madonna, which is most queer people who are at least of adult age today, um, even if they didn't necessarily love Madonna, cannot discount the like legendarianism of being on stage with Madonna. Even the notion of sharing the stage with any superstar, but let alone Madonna, who's had a career that's like, 4 times as long as, or at least twice as long now as people like Beyonce, 3 times as long, whatever. The point is longer. And so, she's a queer icon, a cultural icon, a music icon, just so much. And the fact that you clearly it's demonstrated in celebration. And so now you're cemented. And the fact that you have gotten to like not only be on stage with her, but be on her stage with her in a position of power as a Black queer person, as the MC of the entire show, I think is fantastic. And you got to wear some of her iconic outfits, and you also got to bring some of great,
not the actual ones, to be clear. I am
okay.
much larger than Madonna.
And bring in even some of Grace
Much
Jones
larger.
in to the mix, which maybe everybody, I don't know how many people would have been aware of that if, otherwise, but I obviously recognize Grace Jones.
Yeah.
And so I think that's just wonderful. And I'm just really proud of you. And yeah, congratulations. And I got to see the show.
Oh, thank
and
you.
you were fantastic. It was great. So welcome back.
I appreciate that. It was a real fun time. And I think there's going to be like
a movie.
They record all concerts. There's probably going to be like they put the concerts on TV. You know how they do. They used to say DVD back in the day, but it's not. It's obviously not going to be a DVD. That would be absurd. But like, it'll probably be somewhere, I'm sure. Not that I'm in the inner camp and know when and what's going to be going on. Was I frozen?
Wait, I thought I froze. Did I freeze?
Okay.
I thought you froze, then I froze because I was like, did I freeze? Okay.
It was me. Well, today we have a topic that is very near and dear to my heart, and it's quite complex. Today we're going to be talking about colorism.
Yeah, and people, I think this is what I'm afraid of, that unless we define it right here, right now, which we're going to do, colorism, the word colorism could go the way of woke, CRT, and all the other words that people, a lot of elected officials have used to demonize, marginalized communities, people of color.
Who got demonized? I seen some demonized. This girl got some demon eyes.
So
honey.
The question is, what exactly is colorism? And colorism is not my alarm going off. Sorry. Colorism is a ringtone, darling, and you can have it too for $2.99. Colorism is a form of.
Oh my God! Do you remember ringtones? Oh my God! Do you remember
on our phones?
I mean, people. Yeah, but people like when you would like go and buy ringtones. And ringtones would be actual songs.
Oh,
It'd be
you're
like
right.
the song. First, it was like a MIDI. First, it was a MIDI file. It'd be like dee 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 boot dee dee dee, like Boots with a Fur. And then it would actually be like Nelly singing, like apple bottom jeans. Or was that Nelly? I can't remember. And then they'd have callback tones where when you call someone, instead of hearing ringing, you would hear a song. Yeah, but then everyone forgot to like updated, so everyone had the same song. Everyone had that classical music song. And now I feel like most people now just keep their phones on silent because my uncle has a ringtone, and whenever his phone rings, I'm like, what in 2024 a ringtone? A ringtone. That
Mine's
is wild.
The default. I'm not gonna lie. But that was my alarm. Anyway, the point is colorism. Colorism is the form of prejudice or discrimination that favors people with lighter skin tones over those with darker skin tones. And it's not just about being Black. It's about the many shades within the community. And colorism affects, colorism is, it's the value that is placed on folks with lighter skin is a direct reflection of white supremacy, right? And which is a byproduct of, colonization around the world, which is why colorism not only affects people here in America and most notably for the purposes of our podcast, Black folks, but people in the Latinx community, people Asian community, people who are in people of color, people who aren't white. Colorism affects every single population I would imagine, and I've heard of on every continent, everywhere.
And it's so odd that colorism seems to really not affect white people, most white people. There are some white people that certainly benefit from it a lot. But within white people, if you're tan,
it's the
for some
opposite.
reason with white people, being darker is
but that's
it.
only
Isn't it
only
so weird that
but only if it is false or by tanning. I don't want to say tanning's false. It is your skin.
Or you can be darker, but it has to be clear that you're still white.
Yeah, exactly.
If you're darker and you look like you're not white anymore,
question you.
Exactly, but if white people can get darker and darker, and everyone's like, yes, get it, honey, you're tan mom, you're iconic.
Ouch.
You're what's it, Jersey Shore, tan laundry gym, yes, honey, get it. But obviously within Asian culture, within Black African diasporic culture, especially in not all of these, especially within Hispanic communities, especially Latin American Hispanic communities, in Cuba, where that's even they even had amazing Cuban artists like Celia Cruz, who created songs like La Negra Tiene Tumbao to celebrate what it means to be Black in Cuba, because of how celebrated it was to be white in Cuba. And apparently Cuba had a great white flight, just like a lot of the suburbs of America had, when a lot of white Cubans were like, we're going to America, honey.
Yeah. And it's it is so complex, how it's not complex, but it's really interesting how different ethnicities and races have mixed, especially in the area of Central America and the Caribbean. And that's obviously a whole nother conversation. But the point is, pretty much every single group you can find, folks, the caste system. I'm still reading the book Caste. It's over on my shelf. That really reveals itself as the power dynamic, the structure that we organize ourselves in, regardless of what continent or country you're in. Folks with the lighter skin oftentimes are favored. And, I think at one point, certainly in the United States, as a result of or during chattel slavery, folks who were lighter skin, whether they were maybe mixed because of, their races were mixed and somebody's master was sneaking out, or whatever, they just happen to be lighter skinned. Folks who were lighter, people enslaved, people who were lighter skinned were favored, and they were allowed to go into the house, work as the house, quote, slave, and allowed to be around the children and around the rest of the family, whereas folks who were darker were relegated to working as far away from the house as possible, usually. And so, yeah, that for a while it was maybe seen as some protection or a way. We all saw I don't know if we all saw the famous movie and the book, Alexander Queen, where she was an enslaved woman who was a daughter of an enslaved person who passed for white until she was found out, and then there's a whole situation. Anyway,
and also not to mention all of the discourse going on. When I was a kid, the discourse around dark skin was very different. There's a celebration of dark skin now that I never saw in media, in any publications, no movies. No, I just did not see it. All I heard was darker, uglier, lighter, prettier, curly hair, kinkier hair, bad, straighter hair, good. And And then I also saw people who looked like me being really told that they were not beautiful, like specifically told that they were not beautiful. And of course, I think the colorism was much harsher for women than it was for men. I mean, there were dark-skinned men who were being celebrated as beautiful, like MC Hammer, Morris Chestnut, or Morris Chestnut. Yeah, well, sometimes I mix up Morris Chestnut and Shamar Moore sometimes. Yeah. All these like very famous, but then when it came to the women,
Shamar Moore is not.
It felt like women were not allowed to. Morris Chestnut's not light skinned. Morris Chestnut.
I said Shamar
bitch.
Moore. You said Shamar Moore.
Black ass Chestnut. No, it's not Shamar Moore. No. Sometimes Morris Chestnut and Shamar Moore get mixed up in my head for some reason. But then I don't know why.
In the middle, we'll land in the middle with Morris Day. Anybody know who that is? Okay.
Morris Day. I don't know who Morris Day is. But then, for me, I saw a woman in modeling who was very dark skinned and is still very dark skinned, Alec Weck. And that was the first time that I saw a dark skinned woman, and Naomi Campbell as well, being truly celebrated in their beauty. And even though it was still sometimes very weird how they would do it, like, she's so beautiful, look at her dark skin. And it's like something about the way they would say it would just be so weird. Like, yeah, she's beautiful, but why you gotta? It's weird when like people who, especially when white people are like, she's so exotic,
yeah,
with her beautiful dark African features, and it's like, yeah, she is beautiful with her African features, but why y'all saying it like that?
I don't know, and it's really interesting because it was obviously superficial. I don't know if that was like Alec Weck, was the one model in the late 90s and early 2000s that was sort of celebrated almost like literally a token in the industry.
Yeah.
But there was still,
not to discount Naomi Campbell, who's also
exactly
dark-skinned.
yeah. But see, Naomi Campbell was not celebrated for the darkness of her skin. She was, I can't say that nobody celebrated her for the darkness of her skin, but we saw that. I'm not sure if you watched that movie Supermodels, where they talk about or is it? Yeah, it's called Supermodels, I think, where she talks about the experience. Naomi talks about the experiences she had as the only, and a lot of times one of the only Black models in the room when she was coming up, which is obviously very different than Alec Weck had many, many years, literally like 15 years later. But I think the Britishness of Naomi Campbell and the fact that, her hair was always straightened. She always, like there were certain things that were held up in Alec Weck that seemed very Afrocentric, that some, and at least didn't seem to translate in the same way with Naomi Campbell. That's my opinion.
I saw a clip recently of Iman talking about her experience as a model. She's Somali. And they were when she first started modeling, the people who were working with her, they did not think she spoke English. So they were talking about her like they were talking about her. They were saying, well, she's not that pretty. I don't know why she's not even that good at modeling. Like, I don't know why she thinks she's all this, that, and the other. And then eventually she hit him with it's like a line in the movie. She's like, I speak perfect English. Like, I know what you're saying. I hear everything you're saying. And they were gooped.
Who's surprised? And especially since we know that in the industry, fashion industry is exploitative by design and by definition. And so we already know that there's lots of young models who develop, poor there's lots of people who look at models and develop poor body image and poor self-image, but models in particular tell stories about how they've developed eating disorders and body dysmorphia and different things as a result of working in that industry, especially since they were so young from the beginning. And so, like, a lot of times they're 15 years old and they're being sexualized. They're looking like they're modeling with cigarettes and bikinis, and they're 15 years old and told that if they gain a pound, then they're going to be never working again, or all these different things. And so that's for the white girls. So what do you think is happening to everybody else? And so in that type of industry, of course, they're bringing in somebody. They will not hesitate to go and pluck some girl from the middle of her village or wherever she is on some continent where they don't speak English, and bring her and make money off of her, put her in a bikini. And so they probably assumed that she didn't speak English because she probably was not the first Black person in there who, you know, she probably would not have not been the first person in there who didn't speak English. You know what I mean? As a model.
Well, it's obviously not. It's not unheard of for people to take Africans and exploit them for their features. I mean, I don't know how many of you know the story of Sarah Bartman, but you know, Sarah Bartman was a woman who was extremely exploited because of her African features. She had a very ample African booty,
and you've all seen that
and
illustration
she
of her. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, and she was, paraded around because her butt was big and exploited. And I don't know if you all know about or Black people doing things that they think Black people just can't do. I don't know if you all know who Tom Wiggins is. Who Tom Wiggins is, by the way, from Columbus, Georgia. Shout out to Columbus, Georgia. But Tom Wiggins was a slave who probably was on the autism spectrum, and he had an extreme capacity for memory and regurgitation. When you hear something, you say it back perfectly. He could speak different languages if he heard them. He didn't know what he was saying, but he could allegedly repeat back like 30 minutes of French, and he didn't speak a word of French. And people were like, "Wow, can you believe this Black person can even this Black?" But he was like non-verbal until he was repeating back what he heard. He could play any instrument. So whenever Black people do something that people think they can't do, like be beautiful or play an instrument or speak different languages, they become something of a spectacle. And he was also enslaved during. He was enslaved, but he was alive during 1865. So because he was a person with special needs, his servitude continued even after slavery had been abolished or conditionalized.
And you think about the Sarah Bartman story and the connection between that, like how she was, I mean, it was basically like, these aren't, for the best way of describing it, like when you bring somebody to, quote, the freak show at a carnival or a carnival sideshow, and you see the woman with the beard, the man with the whatever, the person with this and that, and they're, dehumanized and then put on display. And oftentimes circus performers in those situations have been told or have told stories of not being paid very well or not being paid at all. And there were lots of enslaved Africans who were in this country who had, bodies that were shaped differently or done different things, and they were not paid, and they were brought around. There was these two twins. I can't remember their name. Anyway, we're going a little off tangent, but exploitation and discrimination and racism and white supremacy and capitalism all swirled into one, birth things like colorism. Tell us more, Bob.
Before we get into our guest, I want to ask you how maybe colorism affected you in your life or in your childhood or even today.
I mean, it definitely did. I, was, my family has people, as in a Black family, we have people of all different skin colors. And so there's very light skin, what we call high yellow people in our family, and then people that are like more in the middle, and then folks that are really, really, really dark skin. And, my grandmother, who was the matriarch of the family, obviously, was very light skinned, like very light skinned. And my grandfather, her husband, was very, very dark skinned. And so that was that. I'm sure that was fine. They had a bunch of kids, so something was working. But then,
screaming.
But at a certain point, when they would fight, and insults would get hurled, which married couples hurl insults. A lot of times, the insults were about skin color, and it was never from him. It was never about how bad it is to be so light skinned. It was oftentimes she would criticize him for how dark he was, which is like, girl, you married him, you must love him. Like, what are you doing? But like, that's a whole nother thing. But like the fact that she would be,
and also, what are you gonna do? You're like, Also, you're dark skinned. Like, what are you gonna do?
There's nothing
Like,
you can
it's
do.
not like you're
But
criticizing
I
someone for
mean,
their behavior. It's like,
it's just a
what?
manifestation of the worth that we place in people and their skin color, and the fact that we can instantly create that hierarchy that has nothing to do with our intentions or what we've achieved or our accomplishments or our efforts. Has nothing to do with that. It's just, oh, I'm better than you because of this, and that's it, because I'm closer to white. And so, that's that caste system again. You're born into it, or you are, like you're literally born into your skin color. Yeah, it did affect me, especially with hair, because I have like super kinky hair. And, that was always, I just remember hearing, from certain people, like the kinkiness of my hair and what needs to be done about it. You know what I mean? How are we going to fix this?
I mean, yeah, I mean, as someone who grew up with very kinky hair, which apparently people are like, I've heard some discussion online that people are like no longer saying nappy. And I'm like, okay, I mean, I grew up saying nappy, but okay.
Yeah.
4C hair, as they say these days. I have very, very, very kinky hair. Like it is like wherever you. I mean, I know there's no hair. I know you don't see hair on my head. But I assure you that in some spots, mostly toward the back, I can still grow it.
So you have
And when
hair
it does,
in the back
when
in
it
some
does grow
spots.
in,
I think in the closet, in the
yeah,
back, in the which room is the closet in the
yeah, over on the shelf
you
on the
got some
wig head.
got some kinky
But the hair
hair.
that I can grow, I grew up with with locks and
Yeah, I
fros
remember
and
you had
stuff.
locks
And
when you
and
first
Pep,
came to our
you
show.
you actually Pep just met my family. Pep just came to a family function of mine, so Pep got to meet a lot of my family
Mm-hmm.
members, and we are not all of us, but most of us are pretty dark. We are a pretty dark skinned people in my family. So I grew up in a household where we were never told about being light skinned, but then I had cousins who were light skinned, and I had extended family members who would tell me things like stay out of the sun, or you don't want to get blacker than you
You
already
heard them
are.
talking about that.
Or if I had a yeah, extended, like in terms of like family members who were like lighter skinned than me and my immediate family, they would say things like stay out of the sun, or you don't want to get too black, or I just remember being told that I don't want to get blacker than I am. And also I'm people who are dark skinned know that it's not that you don't get much darker, but when you're
You
lighter
get
skinned,
honey,
your shade
I'm not
tends
light
to
skinned, and I'll tell
change.
you this. I go outside for not maybe an hour, but like if I go outside shopping and I'm like walking around running a few errands and it's like high summer, honey, I am a different,
Mhm.
I'm shades darker, which is like so it's interesting, I mean, I guess I should use more sunscreen anyway.
I mean, those of us with darker skin, we know that our color doesn't change much throughout the year. I mean, there is very little change. So I mean, everyone should be wearing sunscreen
Yeah,
because it helps
that's
you
why I should be
protect
wearing
your skin from
sunscreen,
the
not because
sun.
I'm afraid that my skin's going to change color.
Yeah, just to be clear, everyone out there, and I used to think that
I didn't need it.
I just this is we're
I
really
thought I
going on a
didn't need it.
tangent.
Okay, fine.
We used to.
Okay, we're going on. We're going on.
I was told I need sunscreen, especially because of how dark I am. I was like, you don't need sunscreen.
That's what
You
I
don't need
thought too.
sunscreen.
That's why
Black
I
folks,
said I need
dark
sunscreen.
skinned folks don't get skin cancer.
Okay.
A friend of mine who was a drag queen passed away from skin
Yeah.
cancer. And she was very dark skinned. Shout out to C Maddox.
Yeah.
She was very, very dark skinned. And so just so y'all know, us dark skinned baddies, we need to be wearing sunscreen, not to stop yourself from getting darker, but the sun is dangerous. She is a bitch. She is a violent, aggressive, literally radioactive monster, and we need to be protecting ourselves from her
The
at
only
all
part of
points in
colorism
time.
that I wanna, I mean, not the only part, but like there's only, I think that for those who may not understand it, which I mean, you probably understand it. We've been talking for over 20 minutes. Colorism really plays out very, very, very well in a lot of different pop culture, but certainly in Spike Lee's School Days, there's a number called Good and Bad Hair. And it's a musical number where the light skinned girls versus the black skinned girls have a battle in the salon, talking about, and it's about hair, but it's really colorism at the roots of it. So, check that out. It's Black cinema classic for sure. School Days.
School Days is great. So with that, let's hop into it, y'all. Now listen, colorism affects us in many ways, from social interactions to professional
Absolutely.
opportunities.
And within our community, colorism can be particularly complex. It often intersects with other forms of discrimination, creating unique challenges.
Now, colorism can affect dating, career, friendship, and most insidiously, colorism affects how we see
Yeah.
ourselves.
And it's absolutely paramount that we understand that these biases don't just hurt individuals, they weaken our entire community as a whole, basically, by creating divisions and perpetuating really harmful stereotypes, basically causing us to parrot the same stereotypes that our everywhere from our captors to our oppressors to our colonizers use against us.
To our own people in our own community. You know what I mean? Colorism is not specific just to white folks. People of color engage in colorism all the time, and it's because of what we were taught by our oppressors. So with that, understanding colorism is the first step to dismantling it. So let's hear from our first guest, Lashawn.
Lashawn is a drag queen, comedian, writer, and community builder originally from Brazil. Lashawn speaks to us about their experience as a Black queer expat currently residing in Amsterdam.
Hi, my name is Lashawn with triple A at the end. I paid extra, so please use extra vowels. I am a drag queen, comedian, a writer, and a community builder. I am located in Amsterdam. As someone who cares a lot about their community and is a proud member of the Black community, the Afro-Caribbean community, colorism is a huge problem. When it comes to my experience, being perceived as a lighter-skinned person, it doesn't directly affect me, but the effect is unquestionable. My experience being Black in Amsterdam, so I was raised in Amsterdam Southeast, which is a predominantly Black district. There is kind of this segregation thing going on because most tourists that come to Amsterdam don't even know of the existence of Amsterdam Southeast because it is geographically apart from the rest of the city, and people don't really talk about it. And when people are there, because ironically enough, like the biggest concert venues, football stadiums are located there, it is still so close, separated from the locals, that people don't know. So my experience in Amsterdam would be an experience of erasure and tolerance, which is something that Amsterdam and the rest of the country prides itself for, but I do not think is a positive thing at all. What I mean when I say erasure is not necessarily that people, when people say, oh, I don't see color, it is not that. It is erasure from the mainstream. It is a gross lack of representation in, on TV, but also in places, positions of power. I would say things like that. I would say the queer community in Amsterdam, I would say I am more part of the, if anything, of the Black queer community. And that really is, I'm not talking about the intersection of communities. I'm talking about specifically the Black queer community. I have dabbled in the ballroom community as well, but mostly Black queer people are the ones that surround me. And the reason for that is I would say that the queer community in general is dominated by white people. The famous gay streets in Amsterdam are dominated by white cis gay men, which is a place that I do not feel comfortable at. And also that is a huge reason why I am not really a part of the mainstream drag scene here in Amsterdam or the rest of the country. The mainstream drag scene is predominantly white. I would say that the erasure there also is very evident. When you look at Drag Race Holland, for example, I would imagine that people from other countries looking at the program would not think too much of it and see just, white queens or all white passing queens, let's just say that, for like the first season or in the second season. And here they're a POC queen. And think, oh, the Netherlands, it's Western Europe, almost Northern Europe. It has a very homogeneous population. It does not. There are plenty of POC people, plenty of Black people, especially. I mean, the Netherlands, they really went in during like the Netherlands really went in during obviously the slave trade. Things like that. So they have a lot of colonies, and that's why we're here, and we're not going anywhere either. But when it comes to colorism, that is something, if I'm really honest about it, that I can fairly easily put aside. It is not something that in my direct family I've encountered a lot, I would say, not in direct ways. But I absolutely have known about it since birth, since forever. But for me, it has been on the background. When I think about the earliest experience for me with colorism, I would say the thing that I remember is there was this song, this very popular song by a Surinamese group, I believe, and in it they would sing, and this song would be played at all the parties, and they would sing. There's a lyric that goes, "Girl, you are as ugly as the night," and I know that every time that I heard that lyric, I wouldn't quite understand it. I would understand that it pertained to something that there was a negative connotation with the night, equals dark, but it wasn't in a very direct way, and I cannot remember someone ever explaining it to me or elaborating on that. But I did hear it, and it is something that bothered me, and I cannot remember ever singing along because of that reason. It made me very uncomfortable. I would say colorism has its origin definitely in slavery, where continental Africans were forced into slavery, obviously, and be enforced also into these rules, this hierarchy, this oppressive system to make sense of it or to better have control over these people. And I believe, and what I've learned is that as closer is your proximity is to whiteness, as better you got treated, even though you might have still been Black and perceived as Black, at least you were not as Black as it could be, at least you had some white in there that would sort of compensate for the Blackness. When it comes to my experience as someone being Surinamese, I would say that colorism showed up in a more indirect way. The distinction really was made more between, because in the Netherlands you have a lot of Black people, but there are these distinctions that are made by nationality. So, and even ethnicity, even if it's a made-up ethnicity, and I'll explain that in a bit, where you would have the Surinamese people, you would have the people from the ABC SSS islands, so that would be Aruba, Bonaire, Curaçao, Sint Maarten, and 2 other islands. There would be the continental African people from mostly Ghana, Nigeria. I would say that, as I mentioned before, in Amsterdam Southeast, and I would say in the country in general, the dominant black group would be the Surinamese, Afro-Surinamese people, because even within Surinamese nationality, you have people of Chinese descent, people of Indian descent, people of Indonesian descent, and these are quite large groups. However, the Afro population is the most dominant within Suriname itself, and outside of that, when you look at Black people in the Netherlands as well, and that has to do with being able to speak the language very fluently. Dutch is the first language that is spoken in Suriname, and also the culture is heavily intertwined. Dutch culture is heavily intertwined with Surinamese culture. To give an example, and I'm coming back to your question. To give an example, my grandmother, who was born and raised in Suriname, learned intricate details about Dutch geography. They played trivia games with Dutch cultural references. So before she had ever set foot here in the Netherlands, she was already so immersed in the culture. So there really wasn't any integration process necessary apart for adjusting to the weather. That being said, that really, I believe, has given the Surinamese population such an advantage. And the distinction then was made between the Afro-Caribbean people still, and then you had the Surinamese, you had Curacao people, of which were said like, oh, they're dumb, whatever. But then the worst distinction would definitely be between the Afro-Caribbean people and the continental African people. And it was never really, and that's what I mean with that. The distinction was in an indirect way. Obviously, people from continental Africa tend to be darker skinned. In Suriname and all the other colonies, the Black people tend to be more mixed and therefore tend to be lighter skinned in general. But the distinction was like, oh no, we're Surinamese and they're Africans, quote unquote. This, I would say, up until the Black Lives Matter movement, was very prevalent in our communities. Afro-diaspora communities all over the world really look up to whatever is happening with the African American community because there is such a huge platform. There are so many celebrities. The cultural similarities are quite big. Here in the Netherlands specifically, we have had forever, there is this tradition, this blackface tradition, and it's kind of this Santa Claus, this version of Santa Claus. It happens in November. Santa Claus is its own thing here still, but there's also this Dutch kind of Santa Claus where this white man with a long white beard, this figure from the Middle Ages, I would say, or the Enlightenment era in Europe, has a black slave that he, or a help, let's say, he's portrayed as a help that does everything for him. However, that person is always portrayed in blackface with pitch black paint on people's faces. This costume, for the pertaining to that age, bright red lips, gold earrings, a curly wig, and obviously the all the typical stereotypes for Black people they would portray, and they would also oftentimes speak with Surinamese accents or other kinds of Black accents. That had been going on since forever, and in 2020 that still was going on. Around that time, the discussion to abolish that was very much happening, with a huge resistance from the majority of the country. And now the discussion about abolishing the blackface tradition would be just as much tradition as the tradition itself, you know? I would say that compared to America, there is much less racial awareness and much less space and power, unfortunately, with the Black community to get things like that to have it undone. As far as the tradition went, around 2020, that stopped. Eventually, it became less and less each year, to the point where we are now, where the majority of the country, I would say, has accepted that it is racist, and figure does not appear in blackface anymore. The figure in itself remains, but usually without the curly wig, without the black paint, without the lips. I think they might have kept the earrings, but yeah. So and instead of black face, they would now have chimney swipes, because that was one of the biggest arguments. There were so many ridiculous arguments to keep this blackface figure and to deny that it was racist. And the biggest one was, oh no, he's black because he comes down through the chimney to give the presents. The most recent holiday, a group of far-right people came all dressed in blackface and protested or attacked a group that was protesting against the figure. So it is still an ongoing battle, not as big, but not completely gone either. Black pride has always been a part of my upbringing. It is something that I feel is among all the different kinds of Black people, cultural groups that there are here in the Netherlands. Black pride is definitely something that has always existed and dominates over any kind of proximity to whiteness aspirations. I would say that definitely. However, Black people from here are usually first or second generation migrants officially, even though the colonies existed and other countries were literally officially a part of the Netherlands. When they became independent, that all stopped, and when you migrated from that country to the Netherlands, you were considered a newcomer, a migrant. Most people, I would say, are focused on their cultural community. And I would say that since 2020, since the Black Lives Matter movement, that has really brought the Black community together. And there's way more harmony, way more acceptance of each other, and way more Black pride in general as well. As a community builder, I focus primarily on Amsterdam Southeast. I was born and raised there and have such a heart for the community. I know that it is quite a rare oasis, if you will, in this white-dominated country, to have been able to go to a Black elementary school, to have been able to go to a Black high school as well, and after that it stops. Then higher education, you just have to mingle in white schools. But to have that foundation has given me such a boost of confidence and gave me really quite a great start in life. So that is why I'm so loyal to the district itself. It feels like one of the few things that we as Black people, as POC people really as well, have. I do drag as well. I am a epic fantasy writer. And what I do in my work is erase as much as I can forms of systemic oppression and really try to create this utopian world, or at least a world where the focus can be on actual important things that go beyond race, go beyond sexuality, go beyond gender, all those issues that obviously we here in the real world have to deal with. Someone who is light-skinned and perceived as such, even though for most of my life I never saw myself in that way, and I would never describe myself in that way either. I wouldn't call myself mixed, light-skinned. I would call myself black, period. Afro-Caribbean, Afro-Surinamese. In the same way that you can kind of feel when someone's being racist or when someone's being homophobic towards you, you can also kind of feel when someone does the opposite and gives you special treatment because of the same kind of superficial reason that they would discriminate against you. I know that I have gotten roles because I am light skinned and I would show up and have a white man playing my dad when I do not have a white father and do not have a single white relative. Colorism is a more subtle, more indirect thing than racism, I believe, and I feel like we should pay extra close attention as Black people, especially to how that shows up and break with these ways that restrict us and withhold us from accepting who we are as Black people. Ultimately, every system of oppression withholds people from being people. To ignore things is not going to make it go away. We really have to talk about it. We really have to be conscious about it. If we are conscious about the fact that we are not conscious about it, we should do our best to compensate for that. You know what I mean? With that in mind, try to move forward and try to not only live a joyful life as possible, but to make it as joyful for others as well.
Yeah.
Wow.
All right. Thank you so much, Lashawn, for sharing your wonderful
Yeah,
experience
I think
with
it's
us.
really interesting. That, I think we think of the Black experience, at least I think of the Black experience as really, really key and really sort of tied to America, especially when we consider, American chattel slavery and the slave trade, as a North American thing. But obviously that went all through the Americas, and, even into Brazil. What is now known as Brazil. And so it's really interesting to hear the experience of Black folks from other parts of the world where you don't necessarily think of them as Black necessarily right away.
Yeah. Can I take a moment to let's also celebrate some amazing things about being Black and having dark skin. One of my favorite things about having dark skin, and I think it's a really beautiful feature, is a lot of us who are very dark skinned, we have two different color lips. So your top lip is darker and your bottom lip is lighter. So for me, my top lip is like the color of my face and my bottom lip is more pink. I think that is such a beautiful, gorgeous feature that just makes me feel so, I don't know, I just feel so pretty when I see my little two-tone lips.
I love it.
Do you have two-tone lips, Pep, or are your lips the same color?
They're the same color. I mean, if I
There's
go
nothing-
like this,
there's
they're
nothing-
pink, like,
There's nothing wrong with having your lips. I didn't say the other one was not pretty. I'm just saying it looks like I'm wearing like
a little bit of like
little
the
bit of,
color
like,
lipstick that I have on, like on one lip, like a
yeah, like a
brown lip.
little bit of on one lip.
Yeah.
It's kind of cunty.
Cunty. Put more lipstick.
Do you have anything about being? You want to share anything about having beautiful brown skin that makes you feel beautiful?
Yeah, I mean, what I love about browns, this is going to seem so superficial though. It has to do with makeup, especially considering that. Well, I love the fact that I think my skin is like golden brown. That's the color that I would think. It's like medium golden brown, like hash brown. Anyway, the point is, I love the fact that as a brown skinned person, I feel, and I might not be right, I feel like I look good in every single color that exists on the rainbow. And
you do? And you do? Say it
I look good in
again.
every single color that exists, Sonny. I don't love every color that exists. I hate how I look in red, but I get complimented in red all the time. And so just I think as a dark-skinned person or a brown-skinned person, I think color plays really well on our skin. Just like in terms of like culturally, I think anybody can wear any color. I don't want to say that if certain skin tones can't wear certain colors. But
if you pale, you look stupid in yellow.
There are certain people, and undertone has a lot to do with it, but there are certain people with certain skin tones who express not feeling confident wearing certain colors, or especially when it comes to makeup, not even wanting to wear bright color at all. And as a dark skinned person, I can wear fuchsia and it feels like natural. Like it wears like it's neutral to me.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I love that about being brown.
Yeah. Color does play off our skin. Baby, you will always catch me in a yellow dress. Baby,
I know.
You will always catch me in a bright. I look so good in yellow.
I looked good in yellow in your yellow dress one day.
Yeah. Also, the thing about being dark skinned too is that we can wear black without looking like we're gothic. Like when you have dark skin, if you wear black, but you look
it's sleek. It just looks sleek.
Yeah, if you're like pale and you wear
like,
dark, you wear black, you like a vampire. It's like, okay, I guess.
But that's cultural, because if we didn't know what vampires dress like, then we might not think that. But you're right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, what are we doing?
With that in mind, let's keep. You know what we're doing? We are continuing on. Now, Amryn is a visual artist, creative, and musician from New Mexico. Amryn shares with us their journey to releasing their own harmful colorist beliefs, systems, and embracing blackness in all shades. Let's hear from Amryn.
Hi, my name is Amryn. My pronouns are she, her, they, them. I would say I'm very much a visual artist. I love creating anything really with my hands. I love playing instruments. My primary instrument is guitar, but I really am trying to pick up the habit of piano. But I, on a real basis, was born in Muncie, Indiana, and then moved to New Mexico and lived a majority of my childhood there, and then moved back to Muncie. My experiences with colorism, in the beginning, I feel obviously I was very ignorant to the fact that it was a thing. As a Black person, you understand like the fundamentals, especially as you're growing up. The nuance depends on where you are and who you are around. So growing up, I knew racism was a thing, but I didn't know there was so much nuance to what came before it, what influences it, and like the fallout from it, I think. And I would hear things or be influenced by a lot of colorists, like mentality. And I think, again, it would just kind of funnel through, and I would kind of, again, perpetuate either stereotypes or just like ways of thinking without even knowing. And it wasn't until I would say like maybe middle school around that time where I like started to really hear terms of like, oh, colorism, microaggression, racism, stuff like that, to where it's like, oh, what is this? How does this apply to me? And then what kind of research can I do about that? And as a kid, you're kind of just like, oh, this is funny. People are laughing. You don't really understand why it's like a joke to be made, but to compare people to any kind of like black tar, concrete road, just again, making very microaggressive racist remarks. But you would hear them from, again, Black people in your family, stuff like that. That was kind of like the first ever, I don't know, I guess, like influence that it had on me. And it isn't until, again, the rhetoric is analyzed and it's given a name, that's when I was like, it had like, it kind of got the emotional side of me where I was like, okay, this is something much, I feel like, greater and deeper than just like a joke you can make. Or growing up, my mother was biracial, and my father was Black, and she was a light-skinned woman, he was a dark-skinned man, and I have 3 older brothers, and the 2 of the 3 are light-skinned. So quite literally, there's only like 2 dark-skinned people who were like prevalent people in my life, especially living in New Mexico. You had a lot of diversity, but you didn't have a lot of Black people, at least where I lived. So you saw brown-skinned people, but you didn't. You knew it kind of. It's like it's more of a "you look like me" mentality. So it's like this is what I'm accustomed to. So I don't even think the colorist mentality was like out of malice, but it was more out of just plain ignorance and not even knowing. Like I couldn't even fathom not being a light-skinned Black woman. I feel like that is where it came from. There was like a little bit of juxtaposition, I feel, because though some of her mentalities would trickle down through, especially, when you would live vicariously, you kind of pick up, kind of like not code switching, but you pick up ways to kind of play into, again, the colorist mindset. And she would have those, but in terms of beauty standards, not too much, because she really put in her best effort for me to appreciate and understand my Blackness and what that meant, like the curly hair, just, the dark skin, just everything about myself she wanted me to love. But there was definitely pushback from me and from, again, like friends, peers, stuff like that. So it was kind of like socially, I would pick up on a colorist mindset from her. Like it would kind of but influence me, but not in terms of beauty standards. I definitely noticed, especially younger, I noticed that there is a way to talk to people, because even though my dad is a dark-skinned man, I would see him, again, be treated like with the utmost respect, obviously within the confines of like, a Baptist church with hierarchy. So it's like, for a lot of people, the color of their skin is a way to determine and like differentiate, ranking. I feel like I saw that, but I didn't equate it to, colorism, which obviously now it had a role in it. But then I feel I was most like, oh, I have to act a certain way. I have to put on something in order to, just be respected or even given like the time of day. I feel like I would qualify myself as spiritual now, but I don't subscribe to a religion. Just realizing like, how kind of predating racism and like going into colonialism, and how, again, you're either using religion against someone to put a power imbalance, or even just like the Bible speaking upon light and dark, how much of a contrast it is. And even understanding, I think a lot of my family came from South Carolina, and we would visit plantations there for like just trips and stuff. And you would read about just different practices that came from the church and kind of just were, integrated into daily life, like the paper bag test, and how that determined your kind of like hierarchy within the church. I feel like I definitely, again, hindsight, you look back and you're like, yeah, the people of power, especially within the church, were a lighter skin complexion. In certain events or places, enslaved people would kind of test their skin complexion or the lightness and darkness of their skin complexion and compare it to a paper bag. And depending on how light they were, you would get granted access. You would, basically be approved. I feel like the first ever, of course, it was like billowing, I think, in the back of my mind of like, why do I feel so different? But I am pretending that I'm like, there's something there. I think was in middle school. I like just began having real like deep dialogue about just like race relation, like, again, white supremacy, all this stuff that you hear about, but you don't really like take too seriously up until that age, or if you want to, I guess. But you know, you would learn about it in class, and it was very loose. But I started to have, again, personal conversations at home with like my brother, and he introduced me to a lot of media, like quick bite, like video essays of it. So it's like I didn't have to really, you know, it was very engaging, and so it made me very interested. Like YouTubers like intellectual media YouTubers like Khadijah, like people like that. You often hear like the dialogue between like being light skin, you have like a conflict of being black, like too black for white spaces and not being black enough for black spaces. And so that would often run in my mind. It's like, well, sometimes I do have insecurities about that. Where does that come from? So I think feeling that shame again within like, oh, I have these thoughts of like, again, that colorist mindset, like I've had these thoughts, and then asking those questions and not understanding really even how to trace them back, I think left me with like a lot of like denial in the beginning, especially not even knowing how to trace back and understand that it goes really deep. Because I really just thought it was just like some kind of, it's like it felt very new. I was like, I don't think there's like a cure for this or anything. That was kind of where the shame came from. It was like, this is like this, like, am I just like, I don't know. It kind of felt confusing. I think it's truly a matter of questioning like the thought process behind these jokes. Where do they come from? And knowing that ultimately, especially like in terms of, you know, jokes with peers and especially like at school and stuff, you have to understand that like these are other people's like mentalities. Like these are not your own at all. And to understand that certain concepts, the way you look at things, certain nuances of a joke that it might have or something, it's all up to like people's different mentality, you know, because it really is different from reality, truly. Like thinking back on the jokes that I would make, you think about it and you ask those questions of like, where did I first hear that? Who told that joke? What mentality were they in? You know, what was the reality of that joke? Was there truth to that joke? Was it funny? Was it even just like worth being said? You know, stuff like that, like fundamental questions of like, was the joke funny? You can start to really, I think, analyze like, again, the context and nuance of what you're saying. I've had so many friends, again, who equate like the darkness of something with kind of like a taboo or almost a disgust or a level of disgust. I think there would be a lot of times where microaggressions would come up, and it wouldn't necessarily like direct, you know, me. It wasn't aimed towards me, but it had, again, someone like someone of color, darker skin. They were the butt of the joke, where I'm again put at that like awkward situation where it's like, okay, I know you didn't mean any harm to me specifically, but there's harm being done here. I would see a lot of that, and especially within like music, TV, you really like, the closer you get to whiteness is kind of the ideal image, and to have a lot of especially white friends who would speak of like tans and vacations as something just really to not it was such like the way in which they talked about it was like, okay, but this is like, I don't know, I can't just easily like, just as my brother can't like make himself lighter, I can make myself darker. A lot of people can make themselves darker, but when it comes to making yourself lighter to fit a certain standard, it's very, you know, detrimental to that person, so like psychologically and physically. So seeing people express genuine concern for getting a tan, even getting darker, having Indigenous and Native friends face discrimination or just colorism for getting a tan in the summertime, stuff like that. I was around that a lot. I went through this like whole phase of like, because especially when it comes to like how not only gender and sexuality like makes race and just ethnicity, and like it all can really like domino effect. And so I was on one of those kind of trips where I'm thinking about who I am, and like got on this whole kick of like, well, am I a light skinned like lesbian mask? Like, am I one of those like, you know, like Nike headband wearing, like, because this is the ideal, like, are you a lesbian? Are you Black? Are you light skinned? This is what we find really appealing. Like, we'll push this out to you. And I was like, of course, yeah. Well, I have masculine tendencies, so let me feed into that. And one thing they're going to do is say, hey, mamas, whose mama are they referring to? Is the mama in the room? I don't know, but I know that they're. I think my coming out was so gradual and all throughout my whole entire life, if that makes sense. Like, I always knew and would always kind of like try to live authentically in that, but you like, it's stunt your growth, or certain things would kind of deter that. And it wasn't until I think like end of middle school, I think I had just moved schools from a predominantly white to predominantly Black. I was super into just being liberated and actually declaring and understanding like, no, I am queer. And it doesn't necessarily have to look like anything. But yeah, when it came to dating, it was like a whole nother door you kind of have to open, where it's like, okay, I don't only just have to understand myself and ask questions internally, but I also have to ask them to another person. What kind of mentality do they hold, and what mentality do you hold that like made you go for that person or interested? Being light skinned like equates to goodness, or again, just respect. You kind of lean towards that, especially in social settings. You may not think about it like, oh, I'm genuinely scared to walk up to this dark-skinned person and tell them they're beautiful, but you internalize that, and you're nervous. You don't even engage with the people you might, grow to like, because you're hesitant about it. You hear all these things about, like, again, angry Black women, and especially the men around you, how light-skinned women are better, or again, in songs, you hear all about it. You, again, internalize that. I think one of the most, pivotal moments for my queerness, and then also just my race, was I was interested in this guy, and I think it was kind of one of those moments of just like masking, kind of just like forcing yourself to like the energy and like the vibe and flirt. And so very rarely did he like pick up on my advances. And I think one day I was talking to one of his friends, and he mentioned, he was like, yeah, he's not going to date you because you're too tall, like you like stuff like that. It's like, okay, so there's like some emasculation going on. Like, I think like he doesn't view me as anything like romantic. So I was like, okay, well, I'll demote myself down to a friend. And then after that, I was met with a lot of like, you got any girls, you can put me on to. And then especially seeing his like pattern of just really only dating like white women, I was like, okay, so I'm not even like light enough and feminine enough. So it's like, how do I even go? Like, that's so crazy. I didn't know all these things could happen at once. That like set me back. Lightness can also really equate to femininity, is such a, again, prevalent thing, especially in media. You'll usually have like a duo, a light-skinned Black woman and then a dark-skinned Black woman. And usually the light-skinned Black woman is kind of a main character, or like the main love interest. And then the dark-skinned Black woman is depicted as, again, just like a side character, usually abrasive, or it serves as like a juxtaposition to the main character. And then you know, even just white femininity being like a pinnacle of, you know, people, especially being misogynistic, they'll relate back to that, especially light-skinned Black men having to put on like this persona, being hard, or just to get a point across that you are masculine and you're not like a soft, you know, like light-skinned dreadhead who does the light-skin stare, and or light-skinned mamas, like stuff like that, where it's like you don't want to be depicted as feminine. You stay away from it. But juxtaposition, if you don't want to seem masculine, or because like in the scenario where he was like, oh, you're too tall, I can't date you, it was like, okay, well, I can't control that. But then if it was in the way of like, oh, he's not going to date you, you're too dark, like it's like it still draws attention of like, oh, there was like emasculation, there was like insecurity within what I presented as, and that, you know, kind of threw you off. You can like definitely want to conform and strive for like Eurocentric feminine features. Like it is very weird to have, again, one side of the scale. It's something that a lot of women strive for and have to, that kind of double standard. But then men, it's like they don't, you know, really even, they try to stay away from it, even though that's the same thing that can get them again, like just discriminated against and have a very harsh depiction on Black men, especially dark-skinned Black men. Like it really is something so ingrained in us. Like we don't even stop to think like, where does this country genre come from, and why is it equated again, and why does it only exist in white spaces? Like those kind of questions I want people to ask themselves, because it not only just enlightens you, but it also just makes just watching media and watching these performers and talented people, pioneers, like it's really fun. It's very entertaining, very inspiring.
Amryn, now that's Amryn from the New Mexico. New Mexico is such a funny name. That's such a funny, like, New Jersey. She's from the
It's
New
like they
York.
couldn't come up with more names. New England, New Mexico, New Jersey. I mean, it just shows they were basically just
New England
copying the you know, imperialist system here in America. Like they were just like, let's get away from England, but let's make a New England. Literally.
Is there a place called
Yes,
York?
New York, bitch. Oh.
No, Old York. Is there a
yes,
York? Like, is there an Old York?
And well, there's.
Oh yeah, it's a city in North Yorkshire.
Yeah, exactly.
Not York. Oh, York does not. This look like an Old York.
Wait, what looks like an Old York? Wait, are you looking at?
I'm looking at pictures of York, and baby, it's giving Old York. No, I'm sorry. Anyone in York, I'm sure you're lovely people. I'm sure York is a great place. I'm sure York is. So in this event, to celebrate another beautiful thing that I love about being dark skinned, I want to say this. When we talk about makeup, I've noticed this whenever a person with more fair skin is doing their makeup, baby, you have to, like, if you make a little, like, you don't have to be as always like precise with your makeup, because your skin, in my experience, tends to be able to be more forgiving when you're putting on makeup. So if you get some fallout in your skin, it's easier to cover it up. What?
Okay, yeah, that's for you.
For me,
you can be sloppy makeup all you want, darling.
No, okay. Whoa, baby, whoa. I never, ever said my makeup was sloppy.
You didn't.
What I'm saying is, if I get fallout, I've heard people say things, but let me try right now. I'm still eating the girlies up. No, if you get fallout, it's easier to cover it up because darker makeup covers up other things.
That's true, for sure. Another thing I love about now we're just going into consumerism. One thing I love about the blackness of it all is that for a while, it's no secret that many of us, certainly queens, a lot of trans folks, and Also, lots of Black women and whoever wants to, femmes, wear wigs and weaves. That's not like a surprise or a secret. Certainly everybody doesn't. And I think for the longest time, those wigs and weaves, they are definitely made using the hair of Asian folks and people who are, from selling their hair or having their hair stolen. There's a whole industry, but the hair was not really catered to us for so long. It was like not our texture, not our, it just didn't look like it would have been grown out of our head. Even though we were like, wearing it, and Black folks in America spend the most money on hair historically. And so now the hair that's usually most commonly coming out of produced in China, harvested in India and produced in China, they have a whole new approach to a lot of hair where they're really, really producing texturized hair and different textures that match more closely our hair and mimic our hair in such a beautiful way. And I think that that's really cool. I mean, it still sucks because it's like there's a lot of criticisms that can happen, but I love that it's like they're realizing the power, and that we are the customer, and that they are like, okay, let's cater to the customer and create something that actually looks, natural for them. And I enjoyed that. Anyway.
Yeah. A couple of years ago, I found out that if you buy a human hair afro, I did not know this. It's not Black people's hair. It is often
that's
Asian
been
hair
permed.
that has been coiled so tightly. Not just perm. They do this treatment where they coil it and they wrap it in these tiny,
rods.
I mean, like the tiniest little
That's what I'm talking about.
curlers, but they're like little sticks basically. And then they take it out and they pick it out. But it's actually like typically some Asian person's
it's
hair
silky straight.
that is made to look like Black people hair. Isn't that wild?
Yeah, well, that's exactly what I'm talking about. They before it was, if you were, no matter who you were, if you were a white girl and you wanted a 3-foot hair, or if you're a Black girl and you wanted 3-foot hair, you're getting that Asian hair texture, which is oftentimes extremely straight, like very, very straight and thick, which is good because it can be processed, it can be colored in different ways. But if you're a white girl, that more closely matches what would be naturally growing out of your hair. For a Black person, it may not look as convincing. Not that many Black folks have super straight, silky hair, or at least not like, the majority of us don't. Certainly not represented by the amount of us that wear wigs and weaves. And so now they're making wigs and weaves in textured hair that is Afro kinky texture. And I love it. I'm wearing it right now. I mean, sorry, this is my natural hair that grew out of my... Alexa. Alexia is an Afro-Latina singer.
I thought you were talking to my speaker. Bitch, I thought you were talking to your house. Also, shout out to anyone named Alexa. I know that has to be
I met somebody.
A weird time to be alive. Like, at least Siri is like, there aren't a lot of people named Siri. Not there's no one, but like calling your thing Alexa
isn't Tom
crazy.
Cruise's
That's like just calling it
Siri?
Samantha. Probably.
Anyway.
But yeah, shout out to all the Alexas who are listening right now. I know
Siri.
Not the actual Alexas who are listening. If you're an Alexa machine, stop listening. Alexa, stop.
Everybody's all of the listeners. The house has just started talking. Stop what?
But if you are a person named Alexa, shout out to you.
Alexia is an Afro-Latina singer, actor, dancer, and director from Jersey City. Alexia speaks with us about her unique position in her family and community as a light-skinned, mixed-race person of Latin descent. So let's talk to Alexia. Here she is.
Hi, I'm Alexia Cielo Douglas Velasquez. I am a singer, dancer, actor, director, all of the creative things above from Jersey City, New Jersey, New York area. Growing up in Jersey was really cool. Jersey City is a huge melting pot of different cultures, different people, different identities. I always grew up, the world that we live in now, I felt like I've always lived in Jersey City. So it was really cool being around different languages all the time. The schools that I went to were majority Filipino and Puerto Rican, Dominican. So it was just always just a huge, everybody spoke all the languages, everybody hung out together, everybody did their own thing. But there was a big hole for Black people, I feel like, in Jersey City. And there was a place for Black people within Jersey City. And those places were like, Montgomery projects. Those places were in the ghettos. Those places were in the poor neighborhoods. Those places were in the public school systems that nobody gave a shit about. So I grew up with in a super blessed situation with my parents, with my father. I was in a single parent household. And financially, we were just able to live a comfortable life. But it was definitely, especially having half brothers who weren't under the same roof as me, it was very obvious about like the places that they put people, because also I'm mixed, my brothers aren't. So it was just it was weird to be in that space and feel comfortable, but also once certain things or certain things from different experiences came into the space, you saw how much my environment had a place for other environments. Well, I would say probably around like 16, 17, which is like when things start to, become real. I started smoking weed. So I was around a lot of different people and experiencing different lives. I was around some real ass niggas all the time. And I was like, oh, all right. This is especially being from a household where I was raised by a Puerto Rican man. So I already had a big part of Black culture stripped from me because of that. And in growing up and being around more Black and brown people, more Afro-Latino people, I just started to understand like how this world works for people like us. Growing up queer showed up in a different way for me than it did everybody else around me who was queer. I was also raised as a Hebrew Israelite child of God's, okay? A child of God. And I was also brought up in a pretty established gospel group. Like we were nominated for Stella Awards. It was a whole thing. So I was very deep in Christianity and religion and even the lifestyle. So being in those spaces, I identified queerness very quickly because there was a lot of queerness in those churchy spaces. My queerness is also different. I'm not really sexually attracted to people. That's not like how I never looked at a girl or a guy or anybody and was just like, I want to get down with them. Like I want to have sex with them. I want to date them. I want to whatever. It was always like the person. Like if I spoke to you and just something about you, you had some kind of star quality, or I just liked something about you, was infatuated about something you did or how you talk or something, that's what made me interested in them. But when I realized that I was queer for real was actually when I was in college. I'll say conservatory. I went to New York Film Academy to study musical theater and film. And I just remember being in the theater space for the first time, like for real. And other people around me were like, "Oh, you're queer," without me saying it. And I was like, I don't know y'all like that. I'm trying to talk about what I do with my personal business and whatever. But I was just like, like I like what I like, and that's that. And that's still very true to this day. When I told my parents that, which was literally about 3 years ago, my parents did not believe me. They was like, "You not gay. You just a Scorpio." That's what they said. I was like, rude. Yeah, you ain't gay. You just a Scorpio. I was like, okay, sure. It's weird. My mom is straight, but there's a lot of queer culture within her. A lot of queer. She's queer culture. A lot of gay culture comes from Black women. So she's very much so like fabulous, big outfits, church, always wore these elaborate outfits to church. The music she made. My mom is a house singer. Like she made tracks for the people, for my people. So I'm like, you understand. And my dad was also a house dancer growing up. Huge fan, like huge. They were always very much based in ballroom. They went to ballroom events together all the time when they were dating, which I think is hilarious. From my dad. Anyone who meets my dad, they're like, oh, he's like RuPaul's Drag Race. I love Bob. I love everybody. Like he had a whole key when he found that I was doing this. So it wasn't like, I felt like I was raised in the queer culture before I knew I was queer. Colorism is heavy. Colorism is heavy. And I feel like it's not something that was taught to me because my dad was unaware of colorism. My dad's Puerto Rican and Black. My mom is Black. My dad is from a comfortable situation. My mom is from the hood. Like, and she grew up poor. She grew up without parents, like a whole black and white, like completely different lives. And when they came together and had children, which is, I get on them now about it. I'm like, y'all never addressed how this affected y'all relationship and your children. Growing up with a sister who was darker skinned than me and had softer hair than me, that was something I grew up paying attention to, because my hair was nappy. Her hair was nice and wavy and curly, like the Dominican girlies that afroed up a little bit. Having brothers, or having a brother who's also mentally ill, who goes through his own shit, but is also fully black and doesn't know how to, he looks fully black. He does not look mixed like the rest of us. They're like, or that's what people say. He looks black. So he has his own thing going on, and how the world affects him because of how he is, and how that affects our family dynamic, how we all have this distance because of the colorism between us. Even my other two brothers, who have a different father than I do, and they're fully black. And just how they look at us coming from the money and the privilege that we have versus, there's no like real tension between us. We all love each other. There's nothing like that. But the way that we approach things and deal with things is different because of that. And that causes a clash, because I experience a certain amount of privilege that my brothers don't. What made me really, really notice colorism was I started a band during COVID called Chrysalis. And my bassist is a dark-skinned Black girl who is also queer. And just being around, she became one of my best friends, and just being around her, and also my guitarist who is Indian, and me being mixed, all of us are different. And it wasn't until I sat and talked to her that I was like explaining my experience as a person of color, that I was like, I don't think people see me as Black. And she was like, no. She was like, no, you're not Black like me. And I'm like, I know that, but like, she's like, you're not Black like me, Lexi. You're not Black like me. And it took me a minute to like soak that in. I was like, I'm gonna take that in. Give me a while to like try to understand what that means. I went home. I spoke to my mother, who is a dark-skinned Black girl, and I was like, Mommy, did you see me as Black? And she was like, no. You're not. And then my mom is my mom is tea. If anyone ever gets to talk to my mom, like, she will tell you the real. She was like, you are not half Black. She was like, you are not fully Black. I made sure of that. And I was like, I was gagged. Oh my God, girl, gagged. She was like, I didn't want my daughters to go through the same thing that I went through as a dark-skinned girl. And when that literally, my sister and I, both of us, like, that made like the room just so still. And she was like, that's my experience with colorism. That self-hate. I took it so far to get married to a man because of his color and his hair texture and his privilege, rather than just love, and not allowing my kids to just be Black and beautiful, because she loves Black men. Even now she dates Black men. But my parents are about to get remarried, because that's a whole different thing. But but even to this day, my mom, she looks at me and she was like, I hate the mind state that I was in when I got married and had kids, and the reasons why I did it, but I don't regret it. Because she says that you and Victoria both went to college, both of you went to good schools. Both of you have certain privileges as businesswomen. Both of you own multiple companies, manage different people. And I believe that a lot of the reason why you are able to do that is because of the color of your skin. And she was like, and that's not me downplaying the hard experiences you go through as a person of color. She said, but I just don't feel like it's as hard as mine. Honestly, in the moment, it made me feel out of place. Because at the time too, when Black Lives Matter was like really like coming up, and I felt like, I'm Black, I need to be a part of this, it somehow made me feel like I wasn't. And I had to understand that wasn't the case. It was just that within the Black community, there's so many different experiences. And that was just my mom's. And she was just afraid that we would experience those things as well. But it definitely made me feel out of place. And it wasn't something I was completely ignorant about, because though she wasn't in my life my entire life, I get a lot from her, which is like my intuition. And I always knew that I had a privilege that other people didn't. It was because I was pretty and I knew it, but I didn't know that people thought I was pretty because I was light skinned. I didn't know that. I never factored that in. I never factored that someone thought I was prettier than to who I think is the most gorgeous girl in the world, my supermodel, dark skin, like Naomi Campbell looking friend walking in the room. People think I look better than she does just because of my skin color. I think it's bullshit. I think it's total bullshit because I just being from a dark skin, very, very cutthroat to the point home, there are a lot of ugly light skinned bitches out here. Okay. Just like there are a lot of ugly everything's out here. Okay. And my mom, she was very honest with me and being like, you're not pretty just because you're light skinned. Because when I heard that, I was like, damn, like, is that my reality? Like, my beauty's based off of my skin color, which I'm like, I can't even find the right makeup to match my shit. So I don't really know what's going on at this point. But it made me feel like I didn't have a place to be at. It was honestly very, very triggering because I felt like that throughout my whole entire childhood. And my sister and I had this realization. Me and her had a conversation about colorism in the business setting. And what that means like for us, because we're also entering a new phase of developing our businesses. And a lot of it involves image. Whether we talk a lot about whether it's helpful or hurtful to have our faces on it. Because of that privilege of like, oh, pretty light skin privilege type of thing, we're like, do we use that to our advantage as Black women? Because with our companies, we provide opportunities for all Black women. Whenever we have projects, there was a while when we first realized that we were not considered Black because we're not dark skinned, that we spent a lot of our attention catering to dark skinned Black women and giving them opportunities because it was kind of like a guilt trip. You know, white people have white guilt, mixed people got mixed guilt sometimes. And it was just like, I was like, I want to help these people because in my mind as well, I was tying all dark skinned Black women to my mom. And if I was around when my mom was young, I would have definitely like, I would have been, you know, sometimes you got the white man to walk through so you could, what's up? So I can collect my check, collect my money and leave type shit. So my sister and I realized that like, that's the place that we were at in our business at the time, is that we provided a red carpet. The girls and like they had everything. They're talented, they're smart, experienced, all that stuff. But it's because of this that they can't even get through the fucking door. So if we can somehow swivel our way through the door by talking our pretty selves around all these dumbass men with pockets, with money in their pockets, then we can create somewhere for y'all to walk through. That's what being told that from my mom made me feel like that was my mission at the time. Now my mission at this time is to fully just really figure out who you are in all of this. I already know that I love to help Black women, Black dark-skinned women. I already know I like to help women of color, period. I already know I like to help people of color, period, of all identities. It's just that who are you within all of that? Because who are you to say that you can help everybody else when you don't even know how to represent yourself? So I'm really in a place in my life where I'm trying to accept that I'm Afro-Latina. I may not completely speak Spanish, but that is a big part of me. When you read my name on paper is Alexia Cielo Douglas Velasquez, and that is undeniably Latina, and I can't do nothing about that. I have to accept it. And you know what? Here's something interesting too about colorism. Colorism, yes, it's this and what you see, but it's also what's on paper. Because my name being Alexia Cielo Douglas Velasquez on paper has gotten me through a lot of first steps in my businesses. Because one thing about Latino people, we love to put on our people. Like if I'm talking to another Puerto Rican woman and she says my last name is Velasquez, but the V is pronounced like a B, Velasquez, I'm getting that opportunity. I'm getting that next step so I can get that loan. I'm getting that step. I'm getting that email address to that person who owns the studio. I'm getting all of those things simply because of my name. Now, if my name was Alexia Douglas, my mom's name, I probably wouldn't have gotten through that front door because of the way that Latin women look at Black women. Latin people are in denial about them being niggas. That's what it is. Like a lot of us are. And I feel like it's what I experienced with us, with one of the sides of my family, is that they live life a certain way. They do things a certain way. They found a way to blend in. And when you bring in somebody who fucks up your disguise, it brings attention to that you have going on. So if I'm with my light-skinned Puerto Rican family, and maybe one or two of them is slightly brown, and then you bring me and my sister and my brothers to the party, oh, they'll be like, oh, they niggas. Automatically, it just floods everything. So I think it's that whenever we do go around Latin people, we remind them of who they are. And a lot of within our Latin culture, we are taught to suppress who we are when it comes to being Black. So I think that that's to me, that's the root of why there's such a big clash between Latin women and darker skinned women. I can't even just say Black women. It's just darker skinned women, period. And being, even now, like my boyfriend is Puerto Rican, and I experience sometimes dark skinned people coming to certain functions and how that changes the environment. Even if it's just 2 people out of 50 and how everyone's worried about how they're experiencing that environment. And then it makes them just be like, I've heard this. I ain't gonna say who mouth it came out of because of me being in a space. She's just making everybody uncomfortable. You think I'm making everyone uncomfortable because you don't think I'm doing what I want to do, which is listen to the stereotypes like rap music and and be around a certain vibe, a certain dollar amount. It's also classist as well. So, because niggas don't like nice things, apparently. So it's I think it's all of that. I think that a lot of Hispanic people, including my father, can pass. They can pass. And once you bring around the brownies, you're not passing nowhere. You're Latina. And we can tell. It doesn't matter what you do, we can tell. And being Latin is not safe. It's not safe either. If there is a wedding to go to, if there is a family function, I've been to 3 family functions. As between my teen years and now, I've been to 3 family functions on my mom's side of the family, the Black side of my family. I've been to no family functions on the other side. I haven't even seen them. My dad recently got really sick and was in the hospital maybe like 4 or 5 weeks ago. He's fine now. Amen. But that was the first time I saw my grandmother and my aunt in over a decade. And it was interesting to like see them again because when they saw us, they were just so stunned of the women that we are now, my sister and I, but they were also stunned to see how Black we are and what Black is to us, like what it is outside of their stereotypes and the norms that they grew up with, that they work so hard to be separate from. Cause I'm like, yeah, I talk loud. I talk loud. I laugh loud. Yeah, I cuss. Yeah, I say nigga. Yeah, I like to drink. Yeah, I smoke weed. I do all of that. But like, I'm also, entrepreneur. I'm also a recording artist. I also write music. I'm a businesswoman. I'm also an owner. I'm also this. I'm also that. I'm also a puppy mom. The fuck. I'm all of that. But for some reason, they don't see none of that attached to being a motherfucking city girl. Because I'm also a motherfucking city girl. They see struggle, poorness, how most of us is living in a city. But they don't understand that it's because of social racism, but I'm also here because I'm aware of it. And because I am Black is why I'm here in this situation. Okay, so my dad, his dad is Puerto Rican from Puerto Rico, and his mother is Black Native American. My grandfather came from the island and came here. And that was it. That was it for his family, my grandma is from here. She's from here. She's Black and Native American. So she got a whole family and that's when I speak of the Puerto Rican side, I speak of that because they took one man. I feel like they took one man's identity and that was justified to spread across. Because also all the people on my grandma's side, they all my skin tone and up. They're light skinned, so they can pass as well. So it's and where they live, it's not as heavy as it is in New York and in Jersey and the bigger cities, So they're able to be what they are in those spaces and just like claim in ambiance. I will call it an ambiance because I know people like to use culture as ambiance sometimes. Even more so, I feel like a lot of the colorism if you go past the skin color part of it, it's behavior, it's culture, it's where you from. Because a lot of the time I notice that there might be even darker skinned girls in a circle with me where people are uncomfortable with blackness, but they're okay with her because she's really good at code switching. One of the things that I go through is that a lot of people are uncomfortable with me because I'm a real ass nigga in every space that I'm in. And what I mean when I say that is that I'm myself. I'm from Jersey City. I'm a city girl. I'm queer. I love hip hop music. I grew up dancing into hip hop music. I grew up with house. I grew up with ballroom, and all of that is so in me as I walk my life. And I make sure of that. I don't like to hide none of that because I feel like all that stuff makes me sickening. And everybody else is uncomfortable with it because the things that make me sickening that they want to be, they spent their entire life fighting against those things. So now it's too late for you to jump on. You're too old. So you're grown, and it's hard for you to change that habit. You can, it's possible. My parents have, but like a lot of people are intimidated by that. There was no place for you to be in. You be whatever you want, and it's not based off of being white or being black or being Puerto Rican or being Dominican or being Asian or being whatever. It don't matter, because the truth is that like people are gonna love you for you, and people who don't like you for what's going on out here, they're stupid, and you don't want to be around them anyway. So really, just like know who you are, know where you're from, and if it wasn't taught to you like it wasn't taught to me, do the work to learn about yourself. And once you do the work once you do the work, you need to be as confident as fuck about who you are. You need to be as confident as fuck, because you still gonna have Puerto Ricans coming up to you telling you you're not Latin. You still gonna have black people coming up to you telling you you're not black. You still gonna be having religions and whatever, if you're queer, coming to you telling you that you're not making right choices in your life. Because I still write gospel music for artists. So like you really just need to be confident. Like I did, I put it on my arm, Puerto Rico, ya tu sabe, and I'm learning Spanish, okay? And my children will learn Spanish and other things because we're traveling. Just do whatever you need to do to make sure that you know that there's no place for you. Whatever place you're in, you put yourself there, bitch. Period.
Right. Thank you for sharing that with us, Alexia. I grew up with a lot of resentment toward light-skinned people as a kid because of the representation they had in the media, and because how they were just often told how they were so beautiful, and how we were like the antithesis of that as dark-skinned people. And also like the conversation, which is still happening today on TikTok, which I can't stand to see it, which is these people go up to these people in school and they say light skins or dark skins, which by the way is calling us light skins and dark skins.
What's the context of
crazy?
What's the context of that?
So when you ask someone light skins or dark skins, you're basically saying, who do you find more attractive, light skinned people or dark skinned people?
Who's saying that?
Which, going up to someone saying light skins or dark skins, it's
black
like
folks?
usually young people. It's yes, black folks. It's definitely black folks. Yeah, I've never heard a white person say light skins or dark skins. But that also goes to show how insidious colorism is, and how even once the oppressors are not in the room, their oppressive nature is still upon us. You don't have to be in the room to oppress. The oppression.
I mean, that's the purpose of it. I think it's twofold. Oppression, like getting somebody exploitation is like, I'm not defining anything, but my understanding is that exploitation is just the act of getting, the action. If I'm exploiting you right now, once I stop my action, the exploitation in that moment stops. There's impacts and effects that are lasting, but they're not necessarily like unilateral, and they're not connected necessarily to the exploitation. Oppression is self-perpetuating. So once we start, because it's a system. So once we start that system of exploitation that is oppressive, I could die, and then it's going to keep on going, and you're going to help me keep doing it. You know what I mean? And that's what's so insidious, as you said, about it.
Well, thank you all for listening, and thank you to all of our contributors for helping us by sharing your stories. Thank you to Alexia and Amryn and Lashawn for sharing your experiences with us
Special
today.
thanks to our production team, our executive producer, Tracy Marquez, senior producer, Charlene Westbrook, producer, Corey Nixon, and post-producer, Amelia Retaller. And of course, the fabulous music by LaFembe. If you're listening to this, please make sure you like, post, comment. Let us know your thoughts on colorism. Are you somebody that's experienced it? Are you somebody that just was oblivious to it and this is a new concept to you? Can you see how colorism has impacted the lives of the people around you? Let us know down in the comments, please.